Mr. President, I come to the floor today to discuss the proposed minimum wage hike and the jobs that it will cost Americans. With more than 10 million Americans unemployed, the last thing that this body should be doing is considering legislation that would jeopardize jobs. Yet this week we're back in session with another one of the Democrats' election year gimmicks, a 40% minimum wage hike that the Congressional Budget Office estimates would result in the loss of up to 1 million jobs in this country. Minimum wage hikes are a favorite Democrat proposal when economic times are tough and election year prospects are dim. Hiking wages sounds good, after all, and Democrats figure it's a surefire way to appeal to Americans. But the truth is, when the consequences of the minimum wage hike are explained to them, Americans don't want it. Well, why is that? Because Americans want jobs. And a minimum wage hike during such a weak economic recovery wouldn't result in job gains, it would result in job losses. It's simple. When you make something more expensive, people can afford less of it. And when you drive up the cost of hiring workers, employers can't afford to hire as many of them, especially when you consider that many of those who employ minimum wage workers are small business owners. Right now, Democrats are proposing a 40% hike in an economy in which unemployment is already high and job growth is already weak. In other words, a massive minimum wage hike under the worst possible conditions. Now, it should surprise no one that the Congressional Budget Office has estimated that this hike would cost up to 1 million jobs. And who will be hurt most by these lost jobs? Well, women, for one. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that 57% of the roughly 500,000 jobs that would be lost by the end of 2016, thanks to this bill, would be jobs that are held by women. Young people would also be hit particularly hard. Our economy's overall unemployment rate is not good, but the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is even worse, more than twice the national average. And the unemployment rate for African Americans between 16 and 24 is still worse from that, a staggering 23.6%, almost 4 times the national average. Duquesne University economist Anthony Davis estimates that the Democrats' proposed minimum wage increase would hike unemployment for those under 25 years old without a high school diploma by 7 to 10%. So if you're somebody who really needs a job out there, people under 25 years old without a diploma, the unemployment rate, which is already staggeringly high, could go up by 7 to 10%, that according to a Duquesne University economist. Finally, Mr. President, the Democrats' proposed minimum wage hike would harm the lowest income and lowest skilled workers. In other words, the very people that it's supposed to help. When businesses are faced with the reality of higher employment costs from a minimum wage hike, who are they going to let go? Low-skilled workers. The same workers who are most likely to be making the minimum wage. In a March 2014 survey of businesses currently employing minimum wage workers, 38% reported that they would have to let some employees go to cover the cost of the minimum wage hike, while 54% reported that they would reduce their hiring. In South Dakota, small business owners told me the same thing at a recent roundtable that I held in my state. Multiple Main Street business owners told me that they would stop hiring younger and less experienced workers and/or reduce the hours of their current employees. Others spoke of the devastating impact the cost increases would have on their businesses. One gentleman who employs 30 workers at a Dairy Queen in South Dakota told me that a $3 increase in the minimum wage would cost his business an additional $100,000 a year. Now, that is a huge amount for a small business in a rural area of South Dakota. To deal with these costs, this owner, like so many other small business owners around the country, is going to be forced to hike prices on the products that he offers. And that will affect individuals and families in South Dakota and across the country. Middle-class families have already seen their incomes fall by nearly $3,500 on this president's watch. And the Congressional Budget Office makes clear that a minimum wage hike means that their purchasing power is going to be even further reduced and eroded. Mr. President, the evidence is clear. Minimum wage hikes cost jobs. And when informed that they cost jobs, a strong majority of Americans reject these hikes. But unfortunately, Democrats have a habit of ignoring both the evidence and the American people. Take Obamacare. Democrats jammed the bill through Congress on a party line vote over the objections of the American people, and despite plenty of evidence to suggest that Obamacare wouldn't work. But committed to their liberal fantasy of successful government-run health care, they ignored all the evidence to the contrary and forced the bill through. And the American people are suffering as a result. You've got canceled health care plans, lost doctors and hospitals, higher prices, fewer choices, reduced access to medications. The list goes on and on and on. Last week, the 5th annual U.S. Bank Small Business Survey reported that businesses now rank health care as their #1 concern. And more than 60% of them, and I quote from the survey, now say the long-term impact of the Affordable Care Act will be negative on their business, end quote. Another article over the weekend reported that, and I quote again, health insurers are preparing to raise rates next year for plans issued under the Affordable Care Act, end quote. That's from a weekend article. Still another article, this one from the Hill newspaper on Saturday, stated that Democrats in competitive elections generally regard Obamacare as a 4-letter word, with many of their campaign websites omitting any reference to the law. Mr. President, Democrats know that Obamacare has failed, but instead of trying to replace the law, they're just trying to distract with more bad policies that make it even harder to create jobs in this country. Mr. President, American families are hurting. They need jobs, steady, good-paying jobs. Yet Democrats are ignoring this priority in favor of liberal pet projects that pander to their political base. Mr. President, there's a clear contrast developing here in the Senate. Democrats are offering distractions. Republicans are offering proposals that would spur job creation and increase opportunity and help middle-class families. Proposals like Senator Hovind's bill to force approval of the Keystone Pipeline and the 42,000 jobs that the President's own State Department says that it would support. Or Senator Collins' proposal to amend the Obamacare 30-hour workweek provision that's causing employers to cut hours. Or the proposal from Senators Hatch, Toomey, and Coates to repeal Obamacare's tax on life-saving medical devices like pacemakers and insulin pumps, a tax that has already negatively affected tens of thousands of jobs in this industry and stands ready to damage many more. Then there's Senator Portman's bill to require executive branch agencies to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of new regulations so that fewer burdensome, job-killing regulations emerge from the administration. And Senator Lee and Senator McConnell and Senator Ayotte's bills to give working parents more flexibility in the workplace so that they can make it to more soccer games and more dance recitals while maintaining steady jobs. And Senator Rubio's bill to amend the National Labor Relations Act to allow employers to give raises to deserving employees. And my own bill to help long-term unemployed workers by providing them with a one-time low-interest loan of up to $10,000 to start a new job or relocate to a state or metropolitan area with lower unemployment. Those are the things we ought to be focused on, Mr. President. I hope we'll start creating jobs and opportunities for the American people.